A number of winters ago, there was a storm that blew through this area and it knocked out our electricity. When it happened, there was a lot going on in our house at the time. We had a load of dishes in the dishwasher. One of the kids, I remember, was trying to use the printer to print out something for school. Laundry was running. And so the moment it went out, like everyone noticed and everything was affected. The next day, some frustration started to set in. We still didn't have power. It just felt like our life was on hold. There were so many things that we needed to do that couldn't be done because we had no power source. We started to recognize how dependent we were on power, how much we had taken it for granted. We realized that we couldn't continue the way things had been until power was restored. I called the electric company several times to report the outage, but so many people had been affected, they were having a hard time keeping up. And by day 3 in our home, we had turned on each other. There are certain frustrations that just begin to set in when you're trying to operate without the needed power in your life. By day 4, I finally got to talk to someone at the electric company, and I tried to sound as pleasant as I could, just in case you went to church here. And I explained to her what our situation was and asked her if she had any idea when we would have power restored. And she patiently explained to me that we were just one of thousands of people who had lost power, that they were doing the best that they could. And I said, hey, I certainly understand that, but is there any way that we could get just some kind of an update as to the status of things so we could have some sense of when we could have power again? And she said, well, sir, we have been regularly putting updates on the evening news. Regular updates are scrolling along the bottom of your television screen. I'm like, great, so just turn my TV on then? That would be really helpful if we had power, right? And in that moment, when the power went out and we lived without it, we began to recognize, we're more dependent on this than we realize. On day 5, we celebrated when the lights came back on, music was playing. Here's the point of that. When the power went out, things could no longer continue the way they had been. Everyone was affected and everyone noticed. And it's with that in mind that I want to ask you this question. What would happen if the power of the Holy Spirit was suddenly turned off in your life? What would happen if God's power was suddenly no longer available to you? If it was turned off in your life or if it was turned off in the church, would anybody notice? Would things just continue as they had been? Would there be any disruption? Would we be affected in any way whatsoever? A.W. Tozer expresses his concern this way. He says, if the Holy Spirit was withdrawn from the church today, 95% of what we do would go on, and no one would know the difference. If the Holy Spirit had withdrawn from the New Testament church, 95% of what they did would stop, and everybody would know the difference. And so as a church and as followers of Jesus, it is our prayer that we would recognize our power source, that we would understand the reason why there is oftentimes so much fatigue and frustration that marks our lives and our relationships is because we have become accustomed to relying on our power instead of depending on the power of the Holy Spirit that's been made available to us.